Do you want to do more than follow orders, think outside of the box, and manifest your dreams? Then you've come to the right show. Welcome to the award-winning podcast, Holding Down the Fort by US VetWealth. I'm your host, Jen Amos, a Gold Star daughter, veteran spouse, and entrepreneur. For Season 7, I am ecstatic to be in partnership with the Rosie Network to highlight motivational stories of personal growth, financial awareness, and autonomy in our military community. Now, let's get started. All right, everyone, welcome back. It's Thursday. I always love Thursdays because it's an opportunity to bring you all into my world here at US VetWealth. And as much as I enjoy listening to the guests who've been on our show and hearing their entrepreneurial journey, or, what they've done to do more than following orders, to think outside of the box, and to manifest their dreams, it's my hope that in sharing my journey at US VetWealth will inspire you as well. And so this is one of those days, one of those episodes. Every Thursdays, we release an episode with someone to feature at US VetWealth. And for this episode, we are excited to finish up part 2 of our conversation with Gary Redman. So let me open up with a quote from him. He says, "There's more hard work and autonomy in entrepreneurship than having a 9-to-5. And I'm glad that he's honest about this, and you will hear more about this in the conversation today. I think that for some people, it's easy to romanticize what entrepreneurship is about, and Gary just gets real with us. I will say, though, as someone who's been self-employed for 13 years, it's worth it. So once again, I invite my husband, my business partner, to this 2-part interview to co-host with me with our former colleague, Gary Redman. For this final interview, Gary shares how he found the startup he's currently working at. He emphasizes building relationships over time rather than just sending out resumes or making one-time interactions. Despite working harder than working a 9-to-5 job, Gary finds more autonomy and fun in being an entrepreneur. Gary, it was such a pleasure having you on our show. Thank you once again. And to our listeners, I really hope you enjoy this final part of our conversation with him. And stick around after the outro music for some post-commentary. Until then, enjoy.
Gary, I want to ask you about, as you've been going through this process, you give yourself more runway than most. You give yourself a bigger network, more opportunities. And I even made a video about this on our platform. I call it decision stress that most military retirees that I run into. It's just, all of a sudden, I have to make my own decisions on a whole bunch of things. Some of them are military benefits related. Do I take this or not? Do I get out at this date or not? Do we stay in that? Then we got to find the jobs and figure out what we want to do. That adds a lot of stress. And then I have another video where I say the solution to this is what I call compounding curiosity. And I just think you're one of the best examples of that, because you literally, started from cold DMing people on LinkedIn. A lot of people will do that, but they'll only do it like, I want to talk to somebody at Boeing because I want to work at Boeing. So just email everybody at Boeing. And I'm guessing you were messaging probably military related people, but all outside the box. You found me at some point. So in what that is, compounding curiosity, I think is, instead of going after a goal, like you said, these guys always have an objective. I got to sell this house. I got to get this job. Yep. I've got to make this decision. I got to tell my spouse what we're doing. Rather, by just being curious, all right, it's literally, I don't know what I don't know, which is one of the things I hear most often from military retirees. But then they're not willing to go seek it, whatever it is they don't know. I remember I told myself, Scott, I don't know what you're searching for. We have permission to go find it. And that was when I was 32 at the time, because I didn't do a full career. And so I just want to kind of commend you on that and recognize that what you're doing is, rather than chasing goals, you're building systems that will just compound, will eventually lead to some sort of success. Maybe you'll stumble into a couple things that you don't like, which you already kind of did, but you still have that one, you have a license in real estate, you know how to do it. So just for your own good, like, what does it help you to know about how the real estate industry works from the other side of things? And then being open-minded enough to go to a startup environment. And you probably talked to a couple other retirees who went the traditional route. Again, we're not saying that's wrong or anything. You can get some good jobs working for the defense contractors. But as you've talked to other people who've gone that route and compared it to what you're doing now, exploring this startup, or maybe some other guys that are going through transition with you, they got to be asking you, Gary, what are you doing? What's that like over in that kind of company instead of, Booz Allen or Raytheon or whatever? Those conversations coming up at all? Anything you want to share from that perspective?
It does. And I mean, I'll be honest, like a couple of people I talked to are envious of it. But again, there is risk there, like, right? Mm-hmm. Like what, you feel like you need that paycheck, like the Boeings, the Raytheons. It's a warm blanket. It's a good paycheck and it's consistent. But if you haven't built those other networks outside of that, like you can't take a risk at a startup and then, fear getting laid off, right? Like, okay, like let's say, for example, I go full time for this company next year. I'm not going to stop networking. I'm not going to stop doing these things because like the merry-go-round might end one day and I have to hop to something else. But like you can't take risk like that when you jump into like a singular path.
Isn't it always all a risk? Like, because we were talking to Mike Wallace yesterday and he said, hey, we've had graduates got hired by the big companies. You mentioned it yourself. Amazon people laying off, like they're all going to do layoffs. It doesn't matter how big the company is. It's the new guy who's going to get laid off. So I always say, expect to get fired from your first job after the military, or expect to want to move on to something better when you find it. Don't close yourself off to it. So maybe the startup environment isn't as risky because what do they have in you do? You're going out and representing a company, a firm to other people. You're networking, you're continuing networking, you're doing it for the company, but obviously that's going to pay dividends versus if you get hired at a traditional corporation, you're going to spend 6 months onboarding in a special class where you're learning new SOPs and stuff, and which aren't going to be useful if you get laid off the next month versus you're making your own SOPs.
Fact. I mean, there's goods and others to that. Like you have to be comfortable working autonomously. But the other thing I look at too, when I look at my next full-time role is like, I want something that gives me the opportunity for personal growth while I'm doing that job, right? I'm not stuck in 8-hour meetings with just full of bureaucracy where nothing gets done. I can, if I'm not actively in a role or doing a meeting that adds some sort of substance, like I can go on my own and do some other things for personal development, which then leads into like me being overall more successful. Mm-hmm. So I think like it's not even a work-life balance. Flexibility is what I'm looking for, is like flexibility within the time. I may work 12 hours during the day, but like I'm using my time more efficiently than I would be if I was at a Boeing or even in the Navy or whatever I was doing. I can control that on some levels. Like, yeah, it's more risky, but overall it's going to give you more options if you use it wisely, right? Again, that's the other thing. Like most people aren't going to use that time wisely if given the opportunity to act autonomously.
Right on. Hey, Gary, let's go back a little bit to when we first started chatting. I'm just curious if you wouldn't mind sharing, like, what was your perspective when you first stumbled into us and what we were doing and kind of why you wanted to reach out and kind of how we got started doing our version of networking? Because I'm always like, hey, well, rather than just having a monthly Zoom call, to catch up, let's do a show. Were you expecting that?
I don't know if I was expecting it, but it was, again, I knew I wanted something different. I was nervous about it. I'd never done anything like that. But I realized like once we started it, I was comfortable and I liked it. And I was like, at some point I knew there was some message that I wanted to share and I wanted to kind of document this journey. And I think we're now getting to the point where like, yes, this is the beginning of like, I can be comfortable and say some of this stuff is successful and I can tell people kind of how to do it. Where at that point, like I didn't know what I was, I had zero clue on what I was doing, but like, the confidence that you had in this you didn't even at that point, like I feel like it wasn't even a described process. It was like, okay, well, this is how you did it. It seems successful. I'm going to try to do it this way. And it wasn't even a process. It was just like, I'm going to do it this way. It's somewhat in an image of the way you did it. And that's really kind of what I did. And like, and I think the real fire is like, you said it a lot of times about jobs within bureaucracy is adult daycare, right? Yeah. Like, so I would go to a lot of conferences and I would see that too, is like people were just like, they get so wrapped around about their big title or like, oh, they would go, they would just set in these meetings or whatever they were doing. Their day was all planned out for them because they couldn't plan out their own day. And that's really what it comes down to is like, hey, I want to get, a lot of people find themselves in these roles where they're just like, man, I just want to get a paycheck because I can't accurately plan my day to make money. Mm-hmm. Like, right? Somebody's got to pay me to make money, and then they're going to plan a day and fill my day full of meetings and all this other stuff to make me feel important. That's what it comes down to. So, and I think that's really what entrepreneurship to me is, if you want to use that term of like, I can plan my day and I can make my own money. Like, that's it. Like, that's really what it comes down to.
Right on, man. Well, awesome, Gary. No, I appreciate you coming on and checking up with us. I mean, the cool thing is we can keep doing versions of this, as our version of, getting back into things. Now that we've kind of gotten our thing together, because when we first started chatting, we were still testing out our ideas, which has essentially became our US VetWealth program, starting a war chest as an alternative to survivor benefit plan. Jen, any other thoughts or questions you want to ask before we let Gary go to lunch?
Yeah. Gary, I'm very appreciative of catching up with you and getting an update on your journey. So Thank you for taking the time to speak with us today. And I wanted to ask you, what does it look like at home? Because, very often when we have these kind of conversations with, let's say with military retirees, and we often hear like, that the reason why they have to jump into their first job in post-military is to provide for the family, which is obviously, a very respectable, important thing to do. And so I'm curious, like, how has it been like, with your spouse and what has that support look like for you to go on this journey of, transformation into who you want to be in post-military?
Yeah. I think I was blessed from the get-go of when I met my wife. Like, she was a financial advisor for Merrill Lynch and still is to this day. So we planned our life early to do some things and kind of set us up. And to be honest with you, I bought my first piece of real estate in 2005 and I still have that today. And it was a great investment. So I've done some of these things earlier to set us up. And to be honest with you, like, my wife is behind it. Like, she gets it. Like, she's behind the support. I have two little kids at home, but like, all this stuff is deliberate. And I don't leave the house unless I know it's gonna benefit us in the long run. It's either making me money or it's building that network. But like, I try to keep it focused into like, if I'm not traveling for a conference or something like that, like, I'll focus on networking events Tuesday through Thursday. And after that, like, the family time is theirs. So, but those are the 3 nights that I focus on kind of going to those events, but like, they're totally on board. And yes, we absolutely need a paycheck, but like, it's not this urgency about that we know it's going to work out. We just don't know which way it's going to go. That there's a little stress there, but it's definitely going to work out.
Yeah. And especially because your wife is a financial advisor and she's financially savvy. So I think that's often what we tend to find is, the spouse will just leave it to the retiree to make the financial decisions. Not all the time. I'm just saying we tend to come across, and even in a workshop that Scott and I recently did where the spouses were there, there was 1 or 2 of them that were like, hey, whatever you want to do, honey, so it's just great to hear, what the type of relationship you have with your spouse and her professional background and how you two have been making these calculated steps very early on. So I think that's really incredible.
I think but you hit on a point, like the success is based on the two together, because I would not be able to do this without my wife, right? And most spouses wouldn't be like, hey, yeah, I'm cool with you. It's the same with the 2 kids on a Tuesday evening while I go to a networking event in LA that runs till 10 o'clock at night. But like, she also understands the process and the value in that. And most would, and most would not, be comfortable with their spouse leaving 2 little kids at home to go do something that may not produce any instantaneous result.
Yeah.
And I think I've been very blessed in that sense of like, we both understand what it's going to do in the long run.
I think that's one of the limitations that we see. And I was actually going to allude to it a minute ago when you were describing the situation. I call it the pain of mediocrity, is until the retiree or the veteran, myself included, until I recognized that, these people are just kind of spinning in circles, just trying to justify their existence for their paycheck, and that's, who they got to lay off. It's in we see all these TikTok videos. My day at LinkedIn, my day. It's like, holy cow, is this what's really going on? And we know what the defense industry is really like. Yeah, there's probably some work going on, but sometimes, it depends when the contract's coming in or what war's going on at the time. So the ability to kind of, explore. I mean, to recognize that and to recognize there's no ceiling. I guess that's what I mean by that. By discovering the pain of mediocrity is just my way of putting, like, don't just do what we had to do in the military. Oh, that guy got promoted before me. Oh, shucks, I should have had that. We all got the same, bullet points because we're just in a system at that point. There is no system. There's only your system in the private world. And so I think knowing that what you were talking about, hey, I'm expecting a paycheck. Well, does it have to come every month? What if the paycheck comes once every 2 years, but it's 10 times as much money? Is that okay? Well, for a lot of people, no. They don't either have the financial position, a war chest, as I like to say. Read our new book. Don't forget your war chest, because if you do have a war chest, you give part of that is having the pension. Yeah, that's not enough to retire on. You still got to get a job, but it's a buffer as long as you're not needing every dollar at retirement. So I know you've positioned yourself well for that. But what would you say to people who are just like, I just need to get that paycheck. I want to get paid what I'm worth, $200,000 a year. It's like, you could add another zero to that. It'll take a few years, but why aren't we aiming for that and accepting that that's possible?
I just, because it takes work. It takes a lot more. It's not a 9 to 5. It's a 12 to 14 hour day. And people look at that, but I'll promise you, like, you'll have more fun doing that than you do. I see a lot of guys doing the 9 to 5, and it is more draining on them than the guys working 12 hours a day for something deliberate that they want. And I just, like, I will not go back to doing something that I want to do. Like, well, that's what, but like, that is the goal. Like, I may knock on wood and I need a job and that happens, but like, the goal is like, I will not go back to just doing a job to get a paycheck.
But see, that I think that's like that's our safety net. We know we could always get a job, but we live in America, and America is supposedly known as a land of opportunity, and that's what we're doing. We're taking these opportunities, we're taking these chances on ourselves. And should anything happen, we could always fall back on a job. I also just want to recognize that, or I think it's great that you and your wife communicate really well. And I want to know what you would like to say to, let's say, other couples who maybe it's not as easy. Like, I don't always think, Scott, that military retirees want to be mediocre. I don't think that's the case. I think it's usually a family decision, and the spouse needs to feel a sense of security or whatever. Like, there needs to be that sense of security given young kids or what have you. Yeah. And that is why some of them do, and a lot of them do end up doing the 9 to 5. But is there anything you want to say to, let's say, those couples? Maybe the retiree, maybe the veteran wants to kind of take the path less taken. What would you say to them, and how they can communicate with each other to take those chances?
I think it's just important. Like, hey, I get it. Like, people have different goals. They have different values. Like, there's a reason people take the 9 to 5, and there's nothing wrong with that, right? Like, that may be like, there is a reason that people do things, but there's also a reason, like, but I also see a lot of people are unhappy doing that and they want a different path. So, like, there's no right or wrong. Everybody takes their own path, but if you want the most, but I also see people that want larger paychecks and want to make more money, and they're like, well, I just don't know how to do it. I'm just stuck in this road. I think it's more of, you just have to be on the same page and walk through most of the process together and just talk about it. Like, I mean, that's the thing. And I think once you kind of figure out where you're going and what you want, like, that's an easier. But most people I think they don't figure out that they just need the paycheck because it's like, that's how much I need to survive to live. But there's no real goal there. It's not like, hey, I want to pay off a house in 10 years, or this is where I see things going. And I don't think people talk like that or think like that, because they really haven't been, like, they're just waiting on that next set of orders. Like, well, the military's going to tell me where to go. So all that is like muscle memory and muscle movements that have never been exercised within the relationship for the most part. So
it sounds
figuring out, have your own plan outside of what the organization has for you. And like, people that know me, like, I've always went against the grain for the most part. So it's worked out, and I've made 05 in the Navy, but like, part of it just can't teach it. To the ability to go against the grain. That's why everybody's not doing it. So, and that's fine, but there has to be some talk of these goals before because most people look at it like, well, 12 months out, well, where's the military sending me? And so, like, they haven't been practicing these muscle memories. And that's like, it's interesting to me though, like, as long as you guys have been doing this and like, as long as I've been talking to you and you've been talking to military members through different organizations, like how many people truly like getting people to buy into things and to actually do it, like jump in wholeheartedly. There's a lot of people that say you want to do entrepreneurship, have their own business, but like, and when it comes down to it, people are like, no way, that's just too much work. And I think going back to that, like they just aren't willing to, but I promise, I mean, you can tell them all day long, it's better. And it's a better path of life, but they still won't.
It really is. It's hard and it's worth it. Like, you know, I mean, the lifestyle that Scott and I get to live, you know, yes, do we know what our payment's going to look like next month? No, but like, we are fully autonomous, and we get to live the lifestyle we want, and we worked really hard for it. But that's the key thing, right? It's like being diligent, like that word that you used at the very beginning, and being intentional, and you know, planting those seeds in your social network. Even if you don't know if it's going to blossom into something, it's really a lot of stepping into the unknown. I like to say it's like stepping into faith every day and seeing what comes of that later on. But for people who want that instant gratification, that stability, that routine, yes, the 9 to 5 is definitely perfect for you. And then for everyone else that wants more autonomy, you know, this is what it looks like. This is what it looks like to be autonomous. And it's not perfect. It's not like we made our final destination, but I'd like to believe that there's more joy and purpose and fun in the life that we're living.
Go ahead.
I think that's what people don't realize. There's more hard work and autonomy than having a 9 to 5.
Yeah.
Like, and people are like, oh, I'm going to have more flexibility in my time. I'm like, well, maybe. I mean, maybe you choose these times when you have to sprint and you're not, even if you have autonomy, it doesn't mean I'm going to make all the kids soccer games or I'm going to get to do all the things with the kids that I want to do. That doesn't substitute the 9 to 5. It just means I get a choice. And that means more to me than, you know, not a choice.
Yeah, because I lost my train of thought what I was about to say. But anyways, no, that's a great point on, you know, be able to control your time, your sources of income. Oh, I know. I was going to say, but you didn't just jump into it. You're doing it in your free time. You're doing it systematically, bite sizes, a little bit here, a little bit there. Hey, now I got kind of a big project going on. This, you know, what you're doing now might lead to something bigger, but what I'd say is, and in some ways, you could end up at a 9 to 5 at a startup, you know, as in an entrepreneurial role, but you're still working, you know, particular hours because you're with a group of people that got to show up at the same time. Like that's going to happen too. I think the coolest thing about your story is that you found a smaller business opportunity, you know, whether it's self-employment or working for a startup. Like I encourage more retirees to seek those opportunities out because they're not going to. A lot of small businesses aren't on LinkedIn with obvious job postings because, hey, it's only 3 people, you know, but they would love to have your help and have a competent person who's willing to just say, you know, no, I don't know anything about what you guys do or this skill set, but, you know, I didn't know how to fly a plane before I joined the military either. Like, okay, we'll learn it. It's not that crazy. Like I always joke that the pilots that we talk to, you know, don't want to be on LinkedIn. There's, you know, too many buttons to press. I was like, what? You guys looked at all the, you know, you flew a plane with all these gauges and stuff. So, you know, just congratulations on doing that. And I encourage others to kind of follow that path because us small businesses, we need you. We need you out there.
Yeah. 100%. I mean, you know, thank you guys for what you do back in Virginia Beach. I mean, because there's a lot, like, I mean, you look at, I don't know, Mosquito Joe guy was another, and I forget the guy, him well. I've talked to him a couple times too.
Right.
Yeah, there's a lot of people there that are, you know, again, promoting small business, but again, it takes a little bit of risk and a lot of hard work to make it happen. But I think you talk to any of those guys and they're gonna be like, yep, this was definitely a better choice for me than going the other route.
On. Well, awesome, Gary. Well, hey, we'll let you get out to the beautiful day in LA, I'm sure. But thanks for joining us, man. And I look forward to keep catching up here as you're networking, and we'd love to be a part of that networking circle. Because I know at some point, just by you networking so much, you're going to become the guy to know. And you probably already are in a lot of your circles. Like Gary's the one who knows all the people. It's like, that's the benefit of being the one out there networking. I don't know why nobody does it. It works if you do it. So great catching up, man. And we'll talk to you soon.
Yeah. Thanks. See you.
Hey, this is your host, Jen Amos. Thanks again for listening to today's episode of Holding Down the Fort by US VetWealth. Visit holdingdownthefortpodcast.com to access the full show notes of this episode, including resources mentioned and bonus content. Once again, that's holdingdownthefortpodcast.com. Lastly, stay after this outro music for something a little extra. Thanks again and chat soon. Bye for now. All right, hey everyone, welcome to the Post Commentary. Thank you for sticking around as always. And I always want to remind you all that, especially if you have been listening to the show and you have yet joined our free podcast portal, to join our free podcast portal. It's very easy. All you have to do is visit holdingdownthefortpodcast.com/portal. Basically, at this point of the season, I have built up the portal to be a private podcast for Holding Down the Fort. And I gotta say, I really like the name that I came up with for our private podcast. I'm not gonna say it here because you have to join the portal to find out, but I like the name a lot. And I think it dawned on me like late at night or something. I was like really excited when I came up with the name. It's gonna be very obvious when you see the name of this private podcast. And that is also free. In addition to the portal, it's free. And all you have to do is join the portal. And the podcast is really great for people who want to continue to consume our bonus content on the go. And maybe the app isn't as convenient, but the only way to get access to the private podcast is to join the portal. So once again, the website is holdingdownthefortpodcast.com/portal. And as I mentioned in past episodes, but I'll reiterate it here, I've really enjoyed a lot of the content I've been releasing. Anything from sharing podcasting basics to bringing you in to listen to how I consult other people to my journey of moving my private office back home, despite having a private office for the last 2 years, and why it means so much to me to move my office back home, etc., etc. Oh, and also some productivity tips. And I believe by the time you join this portal, there will be even more content for you to listen to and digest and hopefully continue to get a lot of value from so that you can continue to do more than follow orders, think outside of the box, and manifest your dreams. So I hope you'll join us. Once again, the website is holdingdownthefortpodcast.com/portal, and I'll see you there. And with that said, I will chat with you in the next episode. Till next time.